Sports headphones are booming right now, and when it comes to bone conduction technology, Shokz is leading the way. Now, I've got their 3 core bone conduction models here with one question in mind. Which pair is right for you? Let's find out. Hey guys, Louis here from Smart Home Sounds, and if you're a fan of Shokz, then you'll probably know about these 3 already. We've got the OpenMove, the OpenRun, and the OpenRun Pro 2, 3 of the main models in the brand's bone conduction lineup. But before we get into the nitty-gritty, let's quickly recap what bone conduction headphones actually do, because they're a little bit different to your standard earbuds. Instead of sending sound through the air into your ear canal like traditional in-ear headphones, bone conduction headphones use vibrations to send sound through the bones in your cheek and jaw. Now that means that your ears stay completely open, so you can stay aware of everything going on around you. Perfect if you're running outdoors, cycling, commuting, or you just don't want to shut the world out completely. It's a really clever bit of tech, and once you get used to the slightly different sensation, it makes a lot of sense for people with an active lifestyle. Now, bone conduction is different to the air conduction technology used in Shokz's OpenFit range. That still gives you open ear listening, but the sound is delivered through tiny drivers that sit just outside your ears, funneling the sound into your ears a bit like mini speakers. Same goal, just a different method. Compared to in-ears, bone conduction headphones can be more comfortable, safer, and more natural. Now, to keep things really simple, this trio follows a bit of a good, better, best setup. The OpenMove is the entry-level option, the OpenRun sits in the middle, and you guessed it, the OpenRun Pro 2 is their top-tier model and also the most recent release. Now, to contextualize that, the OpenMove uses Premium Pitch 2.0, which is Shokz's 7th generation bone conduction technology, and these first launched back in 2020 with an RRP of $79.95. The OpenRun stepped things up with Premium Pitch 2.0 plus their 8th gen tech, and those came out in 2021 with an RRP of $129.95. And finally, we've got the OpenRun Pro 2, the 2nd iteration of the original OpenRun Pro, now upgraded with 10th generation dual pitch technology, and come with an RRP of £169. Now there's actually been a bit of a debate as to whether these are truly bone conduction headphones, because they actually use a hybrid driver setup that combines both bone conduction and air conduction elements. Now I'll explain what that means for performance a bit later on, but essentially these are the most premium models in the lineup. Now obviously, because all 3 of these have been out for a little while, then you can usually find them for a little bit less these days. So I'll pop some links in the description below if you want to check out the absolute latest prices. But what are these actually like to use? So let's kick off with the design, because even though all of these models look relatively similar, there are actually some key differences once you get them in hand and of course on your head. Now all 3 use this signature Shokz headband design with the little transducers that sit just in front of your ears. Now this round the neck design does take some getting used to, so it might not suit everyone. You'll also need to make sure that you choose the right size, so if you have a smaller head, then you might want to go for the mini versions of the OpenRun Pro 2 or OpenRun for a better fit. But just keep in mind that the OpenMove doesn't have that option. Build-wise though, the OpenMoves are clearly the entry-level pair out of the trio. They use a plastic ear hook with a nickel titanium alloy frame, which is functional, but you can definitely feel where the cost has been trimmed. The plastic feels bulkier, and the build doesn't have the same flex or premium feel as the other 2. Both the OpenRun and the OpenRun Pro 2, on the other hand, do step things up with a full nickel titanium alloy build across the ear hooks and the frame with a soft touch silicone coating, which makes them slimmer, more flexible, and noticeably more comfortable, especially for longer listening sessions or workouts. In terms of weight, all of these are pretty lightweight options. I'll flash up the exact figures for you, but interestingly, the OpenRun Pro 2s are actually the heaviest of the 3. Now that being said, thanks to the improved weight distribution and reduced clamping force, they still feel really well balanced when you're wearing them, and I'd actually argue that they feel the lightest of the selection when in actual use. Now, there is also a small bonus worth mentioning around the accessories. So the OpenRun Pro 2 comes with a proper hard shell case, which is great for protecting them when you're traveling or throwing them in a gym bag. The OpenRun and OpenMove include a little fabric pouch, which gets the job done, but it's not quite as hardy. Water and sweat resistance is another key difference, and one to take very seriously, especially if you're using these for training or outdoors. The OpenMove and the OpenRun Pro 2 are both IP55 rated, meaning they're sweat-proof and splash resistant, which is totally fine for gym use or light rain. The OpenRun take it further with an IP67 rating, making them fully dustproof and capable of handling short-term water immersion. Now, just to be clear though, none of these are designed for swimming. That's a job for the Open Swim range. It's also worth mentioning that the OpenRun also has a moisture detection feature built into the charging port. So if you try to charge them while they're still wet, it will stop automatically to prevent any damage, which is a really nice touch. In terms of controls, all three use a physical button setup. There's a multi-function button on the left side for play, pause, skip, and calls, and volume buttons on the right. Now, some people might prefer touch controls, but I'm actually happy with the physical buttons in this case. They give you a bit more confidence, especially when you're mid-run or dealing with sweaty hands. As for charging, both the OpenMove and the OpenRun Pro 2 use USB-C, while the standard OpenRun comes in two different options: USB-C and this magnetic charging version that I've got here. Now, for those of you guys wondering, it does work really well. It snaps into place nicely and feels sturdy and quite premium, but if you're trying to stick to just one cable for all of your gear, then that's definitely something to keep in mind. Now, while we're on the topic, let's talk battery life, because if you're going to be using these headphones regularly, whether that's for training, for commuting, or just day-to-day listening, battery life can be a real deciding factor. Again, we're looking at a good, better, best here, with the OpenRun Pro 2s offering double the battery life of the OpenMoves. They also offer a quicker 1 hour recharge time compared to 1.5 hours on the OpenRun and 2 hours on the OpenMove. Both the OpenRun and OpenRun Pro 2 offer a quick charge feature, though again, the performance is slightly better on the Pro 2s. Now, the battery life you need will of course come down to how you plan on using your headphones and how often you want to charge them. Of course, the OpenRun Pro 2s are the standout winner here, but that's what you'd expect with the step up in price. So, with battery life covered, what else do these bring to the table in terms of extra features? Well, the OpenMove and the OpenRun both use Bluetooth 5.1, while the OpenRun Pro 2 steps up to Bluetooth 5.3 for better stability and faster switching between devices. All three support multi-point pairing, which means that you can stay connected to two devices at once, and they all offer the same 33-meter wireless range, which I found to be more than enough during my testing. Call quality is also solid across the board. All three models come with built-in mics and use dual noise cancelling microphones, and in quieter environments, they're all pretty capable with decent vocal pickup that isn't far off what you'd get from your phone. Now, that being said, when you get into windier or busier areas, the OpenMove and OpenRun did struggle a little bit more, and you could hear more of that background noise creeping in, while the OpenRun Pro 2s handled it a little bit better. It's not a massive difference, but the wind suppression seemed slightly improved. So if you're taking a lot of calls on the move, that extra bit of clarity might be worth it. Though it is worth noting that because all three of these use an open-ear design, you don't get that natural seal like you would with normal in-ear buds. So I did find myself having to crank the volume up a bit more during calls to hear the person more clearly. Now, that is definitely not a deal breaker. It's a pretty understandable trade-off, but definitely something to be aware of if you do take a lot of calls. Oh, and all three of these also support voice assistance. So if you're someone who likes hands-free control while you're on the go, then that's baked in and it works well across the board too. The biggest difference when it comes to extra features though is actually where the Shokz app comes in, or doesn't in some cases. Both the OpenMove and the OpenRun don't support the app at all. So there's no extra functionality beyond the two built-in EQ modes on the headphones themselves, standard and vocal. Now, you can switch between them by holding the power and volume buttons on the headphones, and they're fine for what they are. Vocal mode helps clean up speech for podcasts a little bit, and standard brings back a bit more body for music, but that's about it. The OpenRun Pro 2 though is where things get a little bit more interesting. Now while the Shokz app is fairly basic, you can use it to make adjustments to these headphones. You get 4 EQ presets and 2 customizable EQ slots where you can actually build your own preset using the 5-band EQ. Now I'm a sucker for a little bit of extra customization, and I've been playing around with this quite a bit, especially when switching between different types of music or trying to boost certain frequencies for outdoor runs. So although it's one of those features I wouldn't say is essential at first, once you've got it, you do start to miss it on the other models. Anyway, that just about covers everything you guys need to know spec-wise. So what about sound performance? Well, I managed to rope out into a couple of sessions to see how each model holds up when you're actually using them, and we've got some thoughts to share. Okay guys, so me and Al have been testing these for quite a few weeks now, right?
Yeah, so starting with the OpenMoves, I think overall, the actual sound performance is pretty solid for what you're paying. I mean, you know, they're nearly half the price of the OpenRun, so I wasn't expecting miracles, but you know, it is a solid enough performance if you're listening to podcasts or that sort of thing. One thing for me I noticed was I quite like to listen loud when I'm exercising and things like that, and I did notice as I started to whack the volume up a little bit, these get a little bit muddy in comparison to the others. So, you know.
Yeah, I agree. I think I prefer some more bass heavy tracks. I want to kind of hear that to get me through a session.
Yeah.
And I don't really feel like I get that from those. But like you said, they're perfect. If you're going out and about listening to podcasts, taking the dog for a wander, something like that, you don't need anything more than that. And like you said, a really important point, when you consider the context of the price point versus the OpenRuns, then they're really not a bad pair.
Yeah, I wouldn't say they're half the performance.
No, definitely not.
No.
Okay, so moving on to the OpenRuns then. Now, interesting with these, I think the sound performance on the whole was really well balanced. Lows, mids, highs, everything sounded nice, and it was definitely an upgrade from the OpenMoves in terms of overall sound performance. However, I don't think the upgrade in sound performance is as good as you would expect given the jump in price.
No, and to be fair, I think I'm with you on that. I think you do notice a little gentle upping of bass. Obviously, like you said, there's a nice balance of mids, lows, highs, which I think as a package does add some value. It's just whether it's worth that step up in cost for you. Obviously there's other benefits as well which are worth factoring in as well, like it's not just sound performance you're looking to pay more for, but again, if we are talking solely sound performance, that is something you have to think about. They still vibrate a little bit. Obviously I felt a little bit on my cheeks, stuff like that. Definitely not as much as the OpenMoves.
No.
Part and parcel of that, it's just there's less material there, but you know, if you were looking for something that feels completely seamless, like it's not there, I wouldn't say they're that just yet.
I agree. Finally then, let's move on to the OpenRun Pro 2s. Now, I've really enjoyed testing these, and I think out of the three, when you start good, better, best, the overall performance was improved quite significantly, especially versus the OpenMoves. There's more clarity, a better balanced sound, and there's good mid-range and treble. And one thing that I definitely noticed was they vibrated significantly less, even at like 80-90% volume versus the other two models.
The OpenRun Pro 2s are probably where we start to see the real potential of bone conduction technology. Obviously, it's got that hybrid driver design, which I think does make a hell of a difference. And to be honest, I'd probably say they're up there with some of the best bone conduction headphones I've heard to date.
Yeah.
I'm someone who wears AirPods a lot in the gym, runs, things like that. And I think coming from those to a pair of open-ear bone conduction headphones, you do notice that bone conduction headphones do have their drawbacks. One of those being obviously bass in terms of overall volume. And I think if you are considering any of these three, that is something you do have to think about. But that is sort of part and parcel the trade-off that you're making for that extra awareness and all those other benefits as well.
Yeah. Another point that I had to mention, as I've said, we've all tested these in the office, us and the girls included as well. And one thing that they'd noticed was these headphones didn't quite sit as well as they did for us. Obviously, bone conduction headphones work at their best and are loudest when they are sat on the bone properly. But they noticed that it wasn't quite fitting right. I know the open moves, you can't get those in a mini option, but with the other twos, I think that is definitely something worth looking at, because the last thing you want when you're working out, running, going for a walk or whatever, is to be constantly messing with these headphones. Like once they're on, you want them on nice and comfortable and you're not thinking about them again. So that's definitely something else I would have a think about. I've been using these three for a few weeks now and can see how each has their own merit in different ways. The OpenMove is definitely a solid entry point, especially if you're after something simple for lighter use. They're much cheaper, which is a big plus, but you can definitely hear the difference when you listen to them side by side with the other two. The OpenRun feels like more of a sweet spot. They smooth out a lot of the rough edges from the OpenMoves and give you a bit more of a balanced sound overall. But for me, when it comes to sound quality alone, this is where the OpenRun Pro 2s really come into their own. That hybrid driver setup makes a noticeable difference, and while open-ear headphones will always have some limitations when it comes to bass and overall detail, purely because of that lack of an acoustic seal, these push the standard a lot higher, and they actually start to feel closer to what you'd expect from a decent pair of in-ear headphones, which is pretty good going if you ask me. Plus, they're actually not that much more expensive than the standard OpenRun, so if sound quality is something that you really care about and you're torn, that price jump might just be worth it. Alright then, we've covered design, we've covered features and performance, so now comes the big question: which should you buy? Of course, this is all going to come down to you. How you train, what you listen to, and what actually matters most in a pair of headphones. So instead of giving you guys a one-size-fits-all recommendation, I've put together 3 quick scenarios based on real people right here in our office, with the hope that one of them will sound a little bit like you and ultimately help you figure out which model makes the most sense. So here goes. Scenario 1. Meet Kieran. He plays football on the weekends, he's recently taken up walking and a little bit of light jogging to stay active in the week. He listens to podcasts and the odd audiobook, but he doesn't need anything crazy for music. He's not bothered about booming bass or fancy features, he just wants something comfy, easy to use and safe for being out and about. We'd recommend he goes for the Shokz OpenMove. Scenario 2. Meet James. He runs 5Ks a few times a week, cycles to work and loves a good playlist to keep him going. He wants headphones that stay put, sound good and can last through even the sweatiest of sessions. He's not chasing elite features, but he wants a balance of comfort, price and performance. That's easy. He's going for the OpenRuns. Finally, scenario 3, meet Lois. She's training for her second half marathon and a high rocks. She's out running at 6 AM, tracks her stats, optimizes her recovery, and has playlists for every pace. Just like her new running trainers, she wants the best tools for the job, the best sound, best battery life, and full control over how her headphones perform. She's happy to spend more if it means having something that works just as hard as she does. It's a no-brainer for her. She's going for the OpenRun Pro 2s. So, are you a Kieran, a James, or a Lois? Let me know in the comments below. Of course, there are loads of other use cases and things to consider, but hopefully this just gives you guys a solid starting point. Now for me, I think even though I'm not an elite athlete, I'm pretty active, and because of how much I value the best possible sound quality, I think the OpenRun Pro 2s feel worth the upgrade in my opinion. But that being said, I wouldn't be disappointed with the OpenRun or OpenMove either. The OpenRun is still a fantastic all-rounder and probably the safest choice for most people. And for the money, the OpenMove definitely holds its own. But anyway, now it's back to you guys. Which headphones would you go for? Let us know in the comments below. Hopefully you all enjoyed this video and I'll catch all of you in the next one.